Hello everybody, Bill Ballo again. I'm in the XR Center lab today. As you can see, nothing running here right at the moment, but we do have some stuff coming up a little later this afternoon, and then some things tomorrow as well. So this is sort of like an ongoing origin story of how we got to where we got to. So when we kind of my last video, I sort of talked about like, I started using it as a lecture tool, and that's true. I did more or less use virtual reality as more of a lecture tool. Again, I was introduced to it by my current supervisor. She wasn't my supervisor at the time, but Carly Brady. And when we got together, started talking about what were the possibilities of virtual reality, how could it be utilized. I first thought of it as a lecture tool, really more than anything else. I didn't necessarily think of it as a simulation tool and a way to, replace some of the simulations that we might need to replace, or even clinicals that we might need to replace. I didn't really even think of it until 2020. And then, of course, in 2020, the pandemic comes around and a lot of our clinical sites had shut down. A lot of our simulation centers had gone dark. And so we started looking at other ways that we could implement virtual reality and use virtual reality. How could we use that to replace some of that time and some of that learning we were missing? So obviously you can see I'm in the XR Center right now. We have 9 bays for virtual reality. We do both PC-based VR and we do standalone VR as well with our MetaQuest 3s. But we weren't there at that time. I don't know of really that many places that were there. So we had to kind of improvise other solutions. And for people that are just starting out in VR and haven't done virtual reality before, and you're like, how do I get there? Like, I can't do this right now. No, of course not. We didn't start off here. We started off with me carrying around a bunch of laptops that were gaming capable. And I carried a bunch of laptops around. I went from place to place. I went from area to area doing virtual reality. We also looked at it in other ways too. And we said, let's do some of this over WebEx is what we were using at the time. Zoom works the same. And let's not only focus on the hands-on portion of it, let's focus on the thinking portion of it. And that was sort of the big thing, was we really have to be thinking of this not just as a way to get hands-on things, because in virtual reality, you're not getting hands-on anything at the moment, at least. It's in your glasses there. So we kind of went with, well, let's use it for critical thinking. Let's use it to promote some critical thinking. I think that's a great idea. And so that's what we did. So I started meeting with my students, and I would act as their hands in virtual reality, and they would essentially tell me what to do. I would act like I know almost nothing except how to put certain things on. So when it came to putting CPAP on a patient who had congestive heart failure, I was like, well, how is this going to happen? Like, what are we going to do? They would instruct me on what to do. They would essentially teach me how to take care of the patient. I would then, utilizing my hands in virtual reality, put things on. They would watch via Zoom, and they would just tell me what to do and why to do it. And then we would then go back to that patient after seeing other patients. So I started off with them seeing 4 patients in an ER scene. One was a congestive heart failure. One had simple pneumothorax that turned into tension pneumothorax. Another was a simple asthma patient, and then another was a COVID pneumonia. Now, who was seeing COVID pneumonia patients back in 2020? Whose students were seeing them? Wasn't happening, right? Like, not the students. Obviously, the healthcare workers, we were seeing a lot of them. But the students, they were kind of, like, let's not put you in that room and let's keep as many people away as possible. And so we need to know how to treat those things. And that's kind of where we went with that. And so they would go from one patient to the other. They would propose a treatment plan. They would come up with what they wanted to do. They would hear lung sounds and all of that because they were doing everything but basically using me as their hands. And so then they would go, okay, well, let's go back to that original patient. And then I had changed some of the vital signs on that original patient. Now, the program that I was using, Acaticus, people are probably pretty familiar with it if you're familiar with me. That was allowing me to then go and change all of those parameters in real time. The students would then go back. they would now see that patient. They would now try to figure out what they were going to do after their treatment. Like, did they get better? Did they not? For example, the congestive heart failure patient, his blood pressure would start to drop. He'd start to feel dizzy, those kind of things. And in that particular case, you could tell it was putting a lot of pressure on the right side of the heart, and that was caused by that CPAP. So they had to kind of figure out, like, okay, what went wrong, and now what do I do, without having the interference of I have to use my hands for all of these things. That's the way we started out. We even, some of the students didn't have the computer for it. So there was no way that I could have them download it onto their computer, download the program onto their computer, and then utilize it from there. Some did, and they were able to download the program, and we were able to meet in the program. So I had to go another route. I had to figure out whether or not our VDI, our virtual desktop, would work. So we had it loaded on virtual desktops, and then had the students log into that virtual desktop, and then they would connect with me in the program. So that was sort of step 2. Step 1.5, I'd say, is more likely. So we'll talk a little bit more about then where did we go, right? We started off, okay, we're doing a lot of it sort of, Bill's bringing around these laptops. We're doing some of this stuff in Zoom and in WebEx. So like, okay, that's great. You got the critical thinking aspect of it, but now I want students to be working with other students, and I want them to be connected in virtual reality. And I want it to look a little bit more like my actual clinical experience. And that was the next place that we went to. And I will talk about that in an upcoming video. So make sure you follow along. See ya.